We live in a time where sharing everything has become normal. What you eat in the morning, where you travel, your face from every possible angle, edited and refined. Social media now functions like a massive stage where billions of people perform every day, chasing validation through likes, hearts, and comments. And yet, there are people who stand apart. The ones who never upload photos of themselves. The ones who politely turn down invitations with a soft smile. The ones who remain quiet at gatherings, watching rather than performing. The ones who seem completely comfortable being unnoticed in a world that craves attention. Maybe that person is you, or maybe it's someone you know. And if you've ever asked yourself why someone would choose to stay out of sight in an era of constant exposure, this begins to explain the psychology behind that choice. And it goes much deeper than it appears. Let's start with a common misunderstanding. When someone avoids posting photos or staying in the spotlight, we often label them as insecure, shy, antisocial, or even damaged. But here's the unexpected part. They may actually be among the most grounded people in the room. People who post constantly are often searching for something: validation, approval, a digital reflection that reassures them of their value. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Everyone wants connection. But those who don't post have often found what many people spend their entire lives chasing: a sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on outside approval. Think about it for a moment. If you already feel secure within yourself, why would you need strangers to confirm it? If your identity feels stable, why would you feel the need to display it online? These people aren't hiding. They simply aren't searching. And in a culture built on external validation, that mindset is almost radical. But the story doesn't end there, because not everyone who avoids attention does so from confidence. For some, it's something they were taught. Maybe they learned that showing vulnerability is unsafe. Maybe they were judged, criticized, or misunderstood so often that visibility began to feel like risk, like giving someone the power to hurt them. So they pull back. Not because they don't want closeness, but because they learned that staying guarded feels safer than being exposed. Psychologists describe this as avoidant attachment or hypervigilance, a survival response shaped by environments that once felt unsafe. These individuals aren't antisocial. They're protective. And honestly, it's understandable. Sharing a photo opens the door to judgment, comparison, and the constant pressure to stay visible. For some people, opting out is simply easier. It helps them preserve their peace, decide what remains private, and protect what feels personal and meaningful. And then there's another factor: introversion. Introverts don't dislike people. They just experience social interaction as draining, even in digital spaces. Posting a photo isn't a small act for them. It's an exchange of energy. It invites comments, messages, expectations, and the ongoing noise of online presence. For introverts, solitude isn't isolation. It's space to breathe. It's where thoughts can surface clearly, where reflection turns into understanding, where energy can be restored without constant demands. So they remain quiet, not because they're hiding, but because they're conserving their energy. And in a world that celebrates constant expression, that choice is often misunderstood. But here's where it becomes even more compelling. Some people avoid posting photos because they place authenticity above performance. They recognize social media as a highlight reel, a carefully edited version of life, and they choose not to play along. They don't want to reshape themselves for approval. They don't want their identity reduced to a filtered image or a clever line of text. To them, who they truly are can't be captured in a single frame, and they would rather remain unseen than be misrepresented. This is a form of protecting identity. They aren't rejecting connection. They aren't rejecting connection itself. They're rejecting the performance of connection. And honestly, that takes courage. So the next time you notice someone living quietly, don't assume they're hiding. They may be confident, self-protective, conserving their energy, or simply choosing not to perform. In a world that constantly demands attention, realizing you don't have to seek it can be a powerful decision. And here's something most people overlook about always being online. There's actually a scientific explanation. It's known as audience fatigue or self-objectification. Research shows that regularly posting photos of yourself can cause the brain to start viewing you as an object meant to be evaluated. You begin to see yourself through the eyes of others. You become both the one on display and the one judging. And that division is deeply draining. Researchers have found that people who frequently post selfies tend to score higher on narcissistic traits, while scoring lower on self-compassion. Let that sink in. The more validation you chase online, the harder it becomes to be gentle with yourself. Because every image turns into a test, every post feels like an evaluation, and somehow it's never enough. But those who don't post have stepped out of that loop completely. They choose not to let algorithms define their worth. They refuse to hand strangers the power to measure their value. By doing that, they protect something deeply important, their inner sense of self, an identity that stays steady instead of rising and falling with outside feedback. And that kind of stability is becoming increasingly rare. So when you notice someone who never shares their photo, don't assume they lack confidence. They may actually be one of the most psychologically secure people you know. They've chosen to build who they are away from public scrutiny, away from noise, away from performance, away from the constant pressure to prove themselves to people who don't truly matter. Now let's look at what happens when someone spends a lot of time alone. Whether it's a choice or a circumstance, solitude changes you. It develops a level of emotional awareness that many people never reach. You begin to notice patterns in your thoughts, your feelings, and the way you respond to the world. You can sense the atmosphere of a room before a word is spoken. You understand yourself in ways most people never will. Artists, writers, and thinkers have often chosen solitude. They allow time alone to fuel their creativity. They prefer deep conversations to surface-level talk, meaningful connection over sheer numbers. But solitude also has its darker side. Some people are alone not by choice, but because circumstances push them there. Maybe they don't have many friends. Maybe their relationships feel empty. Maybe their family doesn't truly understand them. So they present confidence, hide their vulnerability, and keep others at a distance. This is protective solitude, a survival response. They've learned that depending on others can lead to pain, so they learn to depend on themselves. And yet, beneath it all, there's a quiet wish for someone to simply ask, "Are you okay?" This is the paradox. Being alone can feel like freedom and isolation at the same time. It can be peaceful and lonely. It can feel safe, and it can ache with longing. Some days, solitude feels like calm. Other days, it feels like disappearing. That tension between independence and invisibility is what defines these people. They aren't broken. They are survivors, thinkers, feelers, quiet fighters moving through a world that often misunderstands them. They remind us that happiness doesn't always come from constant company, that strength isn't only endurance, but self-reliance, that connection isn't only outward, but deeply internal. So why do these people avoid photos? Why do they choose solitude? It isn't about insecurity or ego. It's about protecting their space, their peace, and their authenticity in a world that always asks for more. They don't seek validation because they already know their value, and that is something powerful. Here's the truth. Whether you choose solitude or connection, neither determines your worth. Understanding why you need what you need, when it heals you, and when it protects you, allows you to live more fully, love more openly, and finally feel at peace with yourself. And sometimes it helps you realize the world is still waiting for the real you, the one who was always there, quietly growing, quietly surviving, quietly learning how to thrive.